Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Create Smarter podcast. I'm Phil, here today with Tyler and Kyle, talking all about two of our favorite topics, event planning and event production. The two things work together, but they are separate. Sometimes. We want to talk today about what those things are and what the benefits are of kind of thinking about some of those aspects more as cohesive elements as opposed to things that should be treated separately. Because a lot of times, I do think that people look at event planning and management as totally distinct from event production, which is, audio, visual, and lighting. So, Tyler, to start out, can you just maybe define in your mind what is event planning and event management versus what is event production?
So there's preparation for everything, but I feel like the event planning part is really all of the stuff that you do leading up to the event, right? That you're planning for, that you're making sure that the food truck arrives on time, that all your speakers have the scripts and everything they need, all your PowerPoint presentations are all lined up in a row, that every other little detail is planned out and really thoughtfully curated for the entire event. Production, on the other side, is exactly what you said. It is the audio, video, and lighting of what's going to be taking place on a stage, in a room, for the audience, whether they're remote or they're in person. And there's a lot of kind of blending between the two, because when you're planning, you are planning a lot of things for production. When you do our production, it's taking a lot of things that were planned for. So there is definitely quite a bit of crossover, but that's like in its most simplistic form is the way I would explain it.
And Kyle, from an event production standpoint, which is where you spend a lot of your time, you're booking out, rentals for audio equipment. You're booking out projection screens. You're staffing up a room, but you're also figuring out logistics for all those things to happen in terms of where they're going to be in a room, when they need to get there, when you need to be there for setup. How do you see yourself interacting with event planners when you're not doing both roles and you're just doing event production? How does that manifest, and what form does that take, in the weeks and months leading up to an event?
Yeah, there's a lot of art when it comes to kind of event production stuff, but there's also science. And a lot of what I'm trying to do is help the event planner kind of understand what's actually necessary for the thing. Trying to make sure that we're taking everyone's experience into play, whether it be speakers, whether it be panelists, the attendees, based off the room they have too. A lot of times, especially kind of looking at other quotes and whatnot, there's a lot of just oh yeah, we'll fill this. Don't worry, all this is going to go in there. And when you really look at it, it's well, is that actually necessary? What's going to happen in this room? What type of show is going to go on? The event planner, most of the time, has a million other things. Like you said, every piece of logistics they got to think about. As an event producer, that's where it's kind of on you to be hey, let's make sure that we're capturing kind of what your hope is in this room, and how do we put that? Make sure we have the appropriate tools, the people, everything that to be able to capture it the way you want it to be.
Yeah, and with our experience and background in events, more and more we see clients coming to us for elements of the event planning kind of mixing in with the event production, and I think that's actually a really smart strategy. It goes beyond just having your AV company, in contact with the event management side of things, really, really working as part of the event management. It can go a really long way towards creating some efficiencies and making everything run smoother. So I want to talk through a couple of the key kind of parts of this and how we've seen it come into play and how we think people might want to approach it when they're working on an event. So Tyler, a couple of the things you mentioned off the bat just about logistics, everything plays into everything else. So when the food truck's going to arrive, or when catering is going to put out lunch, well, that matters to the AV team, because are people going to bring that food back into the main session hall to eat? And if so, well, we can't be running sound checks. We can't be doing a walkthrough for the next event. We can't be testing mics. That's a logistic element that we need to know that people might overlook. Similarly, the room setup, right? Where are the chairs going to be? How many attendees are you going to have? Well, that matters in terms of where gear is going to go and where we're going to put speakers. So it all really does play together. So, first and foremost, I want to talk about cost savings and where the benefits might come into play, because that's probably the number one area people want to talk about. In what ways, Tyler, do you think that bundling logistics, overall event logistics with AV planning can help with cost savings at an event? What ways have you seen some of our clients kind of leverage our services to be able to save a little bit of money when you're kind of able to approach both sides of the equation?
Well, you just said it. Using lunch as an example, right? Using your grand ballroom as a spot that people can eat, so you don't have to spend for an additional space, right? So the planner needs to make sure that they're on the same page as the producer, that they can say, okay, we're going to be doing these different things. Can we be flexible in these areas to make sure that we're cutting down on money? And the same goes for, what happens with the in-house or just a standard production team, they're going to come in and say, okay, yep, you've got a stage, you've got this many people, all right, great, I'm going to put the cameras all the way in the back, and I'm just going to go ahead and have a big giant stage. And you're not necessarily thinking about, well, what happens if I move the camera up, or what happens if we actually close off some of these spaces or close off these walls, because it might sound a little better as well. So being able to have those folks think creatively of not just, oh, this is what we're going to do, we're going to make a great experience, it's going to cost you $1 million, but how can we be efficient with your funds and the logistics to make sure that you're trimming the cost a little bit and being efficient with your space and being efficient with your rooms to give you the best bang for your buck at the end of the day. Like the lunch thing is one of the things I've seen happen so often, that people will say, we're going to spend all this money on just the lunchroom. It only gets used 1 hour per day. Sometimes maybe they might get used for breakfast as well, but that's about it. And you're spending a lot of money on that room when the rest of the venue isn't being used. Now, you might run into some logistical things like, well, who's going to be cleaning up? You got to get the food out of there. You got to make sure that stuff isn't clanking around when the speaker's there. I understand that, but that's when you work with the planner, you work with the production team to make sure that that isn't happening. And what are the little things that you can do to, ramp up the music to let people know, hey, we're coming close to the end of this lunch break or whatever it may be, and someone's about to take the stage. So just thinking through that a little bit, using the spaces more effectively is by far the number one way that the planner and the producer can get on the same page to trim cost.
Oh yeah, just want to jump on. I mean, general session, think about how little that actually gets used, right? It's typically maybe an hour and a half. It's opening keynote. Then half the time it's like spread away, go like to these breakouts and stuff. When we're smart, I can give you an example, like one we're currently kind of talking with, of like, how do we use that area? Because there's already going to be equipment and labor that you already had to spend money on because you're doing general session. So we're going to utilize that space to do a couple more things and not just have it be a big empty room with expensive equipment that's sitting there. That's the other thing, is like the equipment. How do you be efficient and be able to take some of the stuff and use it other places? If you go with in-house AV, they're going to just give you the quote for the thing. That's why a trusted partner really does help out. And if you plan it right, where you're doing an event planning and an event producer, they can work to kind of help you understand this screen is only going to be used at this period of time right now. Can we find a way to have ample amount of times to have that broken down and be set up in a different location where you need to project something like that? That's ways where we can kind of work together, and that's really where you see a lot of cost savings that you technically wouldn't see if you just go in-house.
Yeah, and you mentioned something. You were recently quoting an event, I know, that was a 2-day event, and day one was 2 smaller rooms that had screens and projectors and things, and some audio and things like that. And then day 2 was 1 large room that had similar requirements, but wasn't going to be in use at the same time as rooms 1 and 2. So the way that you structured this in planning was to say, well, all the gear that's going to be in rooms 1 and 2 is going to be repurposed. We're not going to rent additional. Now, if somebody just came to you, if an event planner just went to an AV company and said, I have a 2-day event and I have 3 rooms, you're going to get a quote that ends up being essentially twice as much as what you were able to deliver there. The only way you make that work, though, is if you're embedded in the logistics. Mm-hmm. If you just send an RFP basically to an AV company, they're going to say, well, you said you needed, 2 screens in the big room and 1 screen in each of the other rooms. All of a sudden you're at 4 screens instead of 2. So it really is about doing that in advance as well. And the same thing with the main room. You don't want your main room to be used for 3 hours out of 8 in a day. You want it to be used for 6 hours or 8 hours if you can, and use those speakers and use that sound. Is there some sort of networking opportunity you can do in between? What can you do to make the most out of the stuff you're already spending money on, and then minimize the amount of spaces you're renting? So I think that's
the one thing I'll say, just to wrap it up with on this point specifically, just because the equipment isn't being used, if it's in the room, it's being paid for. So just keep that in mind every single time.
Yeah, and if you're paying for it, you should find a way to use it.
Exactly.
And the AV company, if they're embedded in planning, is going to be able to, if they're a good AV company, they should be able to help you with planning.
That's why trusted partner is so big. I've done just looking at other like I have some contacts will send me like, hey, can you look at this AV contract we got? I'm looking at it, I'm breaking down the room size, and I'm like, you don't need a screen that big. Like you're paying for a lot of stuff that's unnecessary. It's no fault on these in-house AV, and most of the time it's just, here you go. All I know is what you told me. I have these 3 rooms. I'm going to put what's in there. but there's definitely cost savings to be had if you have a good trusted partner, even if it's just to kind of be a little review, a strategic review of like these in-house services. Well, what do you actually need? And being able to talk about that is so important.
Yeah, a lot does get lost just in the sales process if you don't work with a client all the time or you don't understand their needs. And they said, well, they needed sound, video, and light in this room, and this is what we put together for them. And if somebody actually goes through and spends time to understand the needs, I think that's really where you can save some money.
That's the biggest thing. What is the goal? What are we trying to accomplish versus what size screen do you need? How many microphones do you need? Because if you say my goal is to make sure that the speaker is able to play videos and be able to have an interaction, the AV team might have a different discussion and have a different idea as opposed to, okay, well, you want a 16 by 9 screen and you have 4 microphones. Well, what are you really trying to accomplish? We want a back and forth discussion. Well, 4 microphones isn't going to do it. And then afterwards, if you say, oh, guys, we're on site now, we're setting up, whether they're in-house or a secondary partner, whoever it may be, understanding what your needs are and what you're trying to accomplish is so much more important than, well, how many speakers do I need? How many microphones do I need? What do you need, 1 or 2 confidence monitors? You want it to be great because then at the end of the day, when you get on site and then you start realizing, oh, they don't have what I need, guess what happens? One of 2 things. 1, people aren't going to be happy with the product that's actually being displayed. 2, you're going to get upcharges and you're going to get add-ons for things that, shoot, I wasn't planning for this. Well, that's because you didn't have the honest discussion up ahead, which is why the planner and the producer need to be on the same page.
Yeah, I think what you're bringing up is one of the most important parts of this, which is, a lot of times AV companies are treated as, kind of secondary, and it's just, oh, we need this stuff, give it to us. And that's fine. Like you can think of it that way, but the benefit to really thinking about it as bundling together planning and production is that they are understanding your goals and they're coming at it from a standpoint of solving a problem as opposed to just throwing gear at it. So Tyler, before we started, you talked about the ability for the AV team to articulate needs better, right? And when an AV team is just bringing in gear and they're not embedded in the planning process, they're not understanding the needs as much. Can you talk a little bit more about what that looks like? You gave the example of like PAR lights when we were talking in advance, like, specific gear for specific reasons, and how an AV team that's kind of embedded in the planning can talk a little bit more about the needs and the use cases for gear as opposed to just being like, hey, take it,
I think we will all be the first to admit that we love to geek out with gear. Right, we love to see what type of microphone this is, what type of headphones you're using, what type of lights are all around us. But a lot of times, the AV kids can't articulate that to the client. So when I talk about PARs, if someone came and said, oh yeah, we need about 4 PAR cans and 6 ups in the back, what does that actually mean? Explain that, not just, oh, that's 4 lights and 6 up lights from behind, but saying, you know what, adding 2 more lights to the side is actually going to give us more coverage on the stage, which means your presenters are going to be able to walk further on. Or the backlights, it's going to actually give more of an immersive experience, and that's what it sounds like you're going for. So being able to articulate what's actually taking place and not just, yeah, we're going to have 3 cams with a box lens that's a 70 to 200 throw. What does that actually mean? Right? Like explaining that to the client. So not only that, what this is, if you say, oh, it's a lens, it has a longer throw. Okay, why do I need that? Because that's what the question we get all the time is, why do I need that? What is that going to help with? Or can I just cut this? Mm-hmm. Right? Because sometimes, can I just cut that? Sometimes you can. Yeah, you can.
If you want to, but not if you want to accomplish
this
your
is
goal.
What are your goals? So that's where it kind of goes back to the important thing of articulating what your goals are, and that's where that kind of in-between person really works out well to help go back and forth, because it also, someone's goal from the planner side might not understand how to really get that across to the AV team. The AV team might say, okay, I think things are going to be good. We'll be okay on site. But they might not necessarily understand what the term IMAG is, right? Like just those little pieces go a long way.
It comes into play with roles and stuff like that as well. Like, is the experience for the people who are going to be going up on stage and presenting important to you? And what happens behind the scenes, is that important to you as well? Is it a lot of your C-suite people, right? Is it your CEO and your CFO and your CTO? Are they all going to be going up on stage to present? And do you care what happens to them behind the scenes? Because then you need an A2, which is a secondary audio technician, to talk to those people before they go up on stage and get microphones on them and all of those things. And that's one of the roles we see consistently, people looking to say, do I need that in an event? And sometimes if you go to an AV company that's not, a partner in planning, you might go and say, I don't want an A2. And they might say, okay. And then you show up for the event and yeah, you won't pay for the A2, you won't get it, but also your CEO is going to have to figure out how to get her own mic on, or your CTO is going to have to figure out, oh, do I want my wire sticking out in front of my button-down shirt? And you lose that experience, and an event planner an event partner would at least be able to explain to you, here's why that might be important to you and why you might want to consider it. Or maybe that doesn't matter to you, and you can save yourself some money for staffing for the event.
Oh yeah, I mean that's half my conversation is kind of learning what matters. Do you want to broadcast? Do you want breaks? Like, how do you want this? What happens when the next session comes up? Are you fine with the slides being on screen, or do you want it to be just a clean show that's almost like broadcast like? I mean, that's a lot of what you're talking about. And back to your original point of like, it is probably the lowest hanging fruit that anyone in event production can do. Just speak English, man. Like the amount of times that I've been like told like, wow, man, you speak the language, you can actually speak normal. Like you're AV, but you can at least talk to me. And like, I don't need to know all the fancy lumens or any of this crap that we could like throw around. It's just like, no, you're actually listening to me and having a conversation. So I can tell you like, hey, the break really matters because I have a 10 minute like meetings built into these things. So we need to make sure we stay on time. Like that's one of those things that as a producer, you can easily win just like by being able to speak.
Mm-hmm. That's the perfect example, what he just said about lumens, right? Like that term alone is huge because I've been at events where folks that are the planners are saying, I can't really see the stage. Why is that? Yeah. I can't really see the projection screen. Well, why is that? Well, because you don't have any in-room lights that are facing on the stage, so we have to keep the room really, really light right now. But had you have verbally communicated that to folks prior to the event that, well, you need some more light on the stage because then we can dim the lights in the room a little bit more. That means your projector is going to be brighter. Otherwise, you need to spend a lot of money on a really, really bright projector that is 26,000 lumens versus 4,500 lumens, right? So being able to explain that ahead of time versus, yay, all right, fine, you want me to knock you down from a 6,000 lumen to a 4,500 lumen projector? Sure, I've got you. But
it means
why?
nothing.
It
to
means
people.
nothing to anybody. Even people that are in it half the time, we're like, yeah, sure, cut it down. But look at the grand scheme and what the goal is and the end user's experience.
And this leads me to room setup, which I think is tied directly to this because projectors are something that come into play at a lot of events. And the difference between something like rear projection versus front projection is not something that, you know, your typical event planner maybe is always thinking about. But the needs for room setup are dramatically different if you have rear projection or front projection, and it involves potentially moving up your whole stage, 30, 40 feet into the room to make room for a rear projector if you don't want to have a front-facing projector in the room, or if you don't have a place to rig it. But then it might be a little bit darker, and you have to talk about... So it's the plain English thing, but Kyle, you spend a lot of time in your events working on room setup and dealing with these types of challenges. How do you approach this, and how do you try to have these conversations with people about how the AV plays into the overall room setup for, main rooms as well as breakout rooms?
Yeah, a lot of it's kind of attendee experience. Like, what are you looking for? How many are going to be there? There's some math equations that, like, just based off the research and whatnot, of like how far away the closest person should be to the screen, how far away the furthest person should be. And then you kind of look at the room setup and stuff like that. But that's not something an event planner needs to know. They just need to be like, I'm going to have 500 people. I want them sitting in crescents, and they're going to be like this, and I want them all like 8 seats per table or something like that. So those are the things that I work together, but I don't bog them down in the nerdy details of what I'm doing. It's like, cool, this is kind of the biggest we could do. I think rear projected versus that. It's all based off of like the room and all that, the stuff that we actually need to know, which is fun. But it's also like, well, what are you trying to do? What do you want the attendee experience to be? How many people are sitting? Does anyone's back to the screen? What are we worried about here so we can make sure this works out? Then we talk a little bit about the speakers, like how do you want that? How many microphones? What do you want? But like, it's all just building and kind of keeping that person, whoever is experiencing it, top of mind throughout all the conversations.
And Tyler, I know, you've had some creative room setups that you've worked on as well, because we talked about food, and food is a huge part of these conferences. Do they need to be at tables where they can eat? Or is it an educational conference? So we actually want people to have a place where they can sit and take notes. And it doesn't have to be one size fits all. You've done some events where, because of room requirements and setups, it's, well, some folks at the front are going to be at crescents, but then we're going to have tons of classroom seating in the back. Talk to me about how you deal with those hybrid setups and how that plays into the AV and planning discussions overall.
It's just about communicating. If you communicate what your needs are, you can set different things up, right? So to the point about the half rounds, and then we're going to do classroom style here, and then we're going to have pub tables along the side, and then we're going to do theater style in the back. It's just a matter of understanding, what does your audience want? What are their expectations, and what are they going to be doing? And the other piece of this is, I'll just say this: theater style can be broken down real quick. So if you don't have that many people in the room, you can always pull a couple rows of chairs really, really quick, and the venue can get it out. Tables take a little bit longer. Just one thing to keep in the back of your mind. But going with that, that knowledge heading into the event, like, hey, you know what? It's going to be busy on day one, so we want to make sure we can get as many seats in there as possible. But you know what? Day two, it's not, and we want a quick breakdown of this so we don't want to have to spend as much on overtime. We're only going to do half of this be half rounds or classroom style, and the back half is going to be theater style, so we can just pull the pull the chairs as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and just to put a bow on this, Kyle, I know I was at an event with you where we had a certain type of seating up front, and then there was more like cocktail tables in the back for people to be able to lounge and kind of come in and out more casually, because there's a lot of networking happening in the hall. And the way that ties into AV is, well, based on the way people are standing there and how far they are from the screens, we set up some big 85-inch monitors in the back of the room so that people could see relay screens and see the stage without having to crane and look and talk. So they could actually be using those cocktail tables kind of as intended and still have a really good experience and see and hear clearly in the back of the room.
And that's probably like a really good example of like the main goal of that conference is communication, networking. It's about building community, that all they want is their attendees talking together. Like, right? That's kind of what they do, is they bring two different kind of opposing forces in an industry. They come together to talk. Why we went with that is because we knew that they wanted areas that were able to talk, but if we didn't bring those, like, for how this room was built, it was so long that it was going to be impossible to get a screen big enough to make it comfortable for people who were way in the back talking and whatnot to be able to see. So instead of trying to make it focus on the stage, where we know that's not his overall goal, we worked into, how about we build relay screens that are a little bit further back, and that way that they can still see what's happening on stage, but they can still have those conversations that you really wanted, instead of them being like, okay, I guess I got to go walk down this long like area, sit down, stare at the screen just because I can't be in the back and be able to see what the heck's actually happening. Yeah. So like it was one of those ways that we just worked together to make the actual goal of the conference come out exactly with the AV setup.
Yeah, having the organizers' goals in mind first and foremost. The last thing I want to talk about, and I'll start with you, Tyler, on this, is speaker management. Yep. One of the first things you brought up was like, collecting PowerPoints and things like that, and it seems like such a given. One of the main things that is a huge headache for AV companies is like making sure we have the right visuals and they're lined up, and are there videos and are there audio cues. So this is where I actually see one of the biggest opportunities for event logistics and planning to come together with AV, because this is also where the things that you didn't think about often come back to bite you the most. So talk to me a little bit about what you do in speaker management and how it plays to both sides of planning and logistics and audiovisual lighting.
Like anything in this world, the more you do up front, the easier your time is going to be on site. So what I love to do is have a quick call, can be 15 minutes with every single speaker that's going to be stepping on stage. I like to know, do you have a PowerPoint presentation? Do you have notes inside your presentation? Do you have any videos inside your presentation? Do you like to advance the slides yourselves, or don't you? Do you want to see this next slide? Do you want to see notes? Do you want to see just your current slide? What kind of preference do you have for microphone, and what type of questions do you have for the audience? Do you do any sort of audience interaction? Just that alone, you can send it in as a questionnaire to folks, but by having those questions in advance, you can then prepare for every single thing coming up there. I know when that person steps on the stage, when Kyle, my keynote speaker for this next event, comes up on stage, I know he wants to see all of his notes. I know he wants a lavalier microphone. I know he wants a microphone in the audience, because he's going to have one person that's running, and I know he has 2 videos at different points in times throughout. I also know that he's going to be getting it to me in time for that event, that I have it and I can take a look at it, do a once over of it, and make sure that his actual formatting works with my computer, because I know everybody wants to talk about PowerPoint X, but guess what? Everybody uses something different. PowerPoint X is wonderful, but if someone designed it in Canva and those fonts aren't there, it might not necessarily work. So those are the little things that the event planner can do to help make the lives a lot easier for the production team on site. Because if you don't do that and you get on site, and then guess what? We're not necessarily set up to see the presentation and their notes. Or we only have stick mics, we don't have lavaliers. Or we only have lavaliers and no stick mics. And we didn't know there was going to be engagement in the room. And especially if you have any sort of videos playing in there and you're not hooked up for it to be able to hear anything in the audience, well, you're going to be putting a lot of headaches to rest if you just answer those questions ahead of time. Otherwise, you're going to be running around like a chicken with your head cut off, and that ain't fun for anybody.
And I promise you, as the AV company who sometimes has to show up and just deal with it, they want to know the answers to these questions.
Yeah.
And this is the number one area where you're going to get bit with change orders if you don't prep appropriately, because the AV company is going to be there and you're going to have a situation where a speaker is going to say, I have a video to play off of the internet, right? I have to access it off of YouTube. Now, if you're prepared for that and you're ready to go, no problem. But if you're not prepared for that in the moment, you can say, there's no internet back here. Oh, we're not prepared to play a video. There's no audio from this computer. We can't advance it the right way. We don't have a queue. There's not a box to convert this computer. We only have one machine. There's no playback. There's a million things that, if addressed in advance, are super, super easy to solve and plan for and let you know exactly how much it's going to cost. But if it happens in the moment, one of two things are going to happen. You're going to have an expensive change order that's going to have to be executed quickly and put a lot of stress on people and have a chance of failing, or you're going to have to tell an important speaker no, and no one wants to do either one of those things.
The other thing with this that's important is ask a lot of questions, but also tell them the limitations
Yes.
of what you have.
I was gonna
because
say that
if you
as
just
well.
leave it wide open and say it's open to interpretation, you've got your laptop, sure, bring it in. You're in deep you're SOL. I'm sorry, you're shit out of luck entirely when this happens, because you're leaving everything up to chance. Whereas, if you just set the boundaries and the ground rules of, hey, here's what we have, explain what your setup is, it's gonna go a long way and it's gonna help you out.
Yeah, and I was going to say, Kyle, there's a line here. You have speaker management, and sometimes it's asking what their requirements are, and sometimes it's understanding their needs and telling them what the limitations are. You run into that a lot, especially in breakout rooms.
Yeah.
You've said to me that you think that speakers are really receptive to almost anything as long as you just communicate with them and tell them what to expect in advance. Can you talk a little bit more about those experiences?
Yeah. Gonna caveat, there's always going to be someone who is not going to listen or anything like that. But for the most part, like, I've even had some breakout room speakers who had very specific things that they wanted to do. Now, what the problem is, that breakout room speaker wasn't aware there's like 3 other sessions that are happening before yours. So setting up this room for yours isn't going to make sense. I'm happy to work with you if it makes sense. Like, a lot of times it's like, hey, here's where your drop is. Here's where this is. That's why, like, here's your HDMI drop. This is where you get your computer in. Do you have slides? Because if you don't have slides, then we could talk about ways to go about it. But that is, ideally, it's happening pre. That way, when they show up, because at the end of the day, the speakers just want to be successful on stage, right? And really, AV's job is to make speakers successful. That means they're not thinking about things that they don't know about. They can just walk up on stage. If they want to advance a slide, they can advance a slide. They can talk. They can have their own presentations. Presentations are becoming more complicated, as we know. There's Canva's great, but it's also starting to create a lot of, like, all these fun animations and things that kind of got washed away, and now are starting to come back because people are like, oh, it's not that hard to make a little animation, my thing. So there's cool aspects of it, but just talking to the speaker beforehand really does save you that time. As, like, the AV, you know what's going on. You talk to them, you understand what their needs are, just like you talk to the event manager, the event producer, the event planner. That was the word I was trying to look for. Talking to them beforehand just really does help out. And like you say, it's the biggest cost savings you're going to have from, like, an event planning side. It doesn't even need to be. I'll give one example I had was, we just walked through the agenda, myself and the event planner, and they just were like, okay, here's what's going to happen at this time. Here's what's going to be on the stage. Here's what happens at this time. Here's what how many microphones we need. Here's what happens. Here's what's going to be on the PowerPoint. It wasn't a deep, crazy thing where I was trying to figure out everything. It was just straight up giving me the heads up of, like, this day-long event. Here's what happens when it happens. And then I can go ahead and make sure that my A1 or my audio engineer, my lighting tech, my multi-source, all of them know what's going on.
Yeah, and to bring it all back to cost savings, when you have these speaker management calls, it gives you a really good chance to deal with event setup in a really thoughtful way. So let's just say, let's do a little math. This isn't a math pod. This is a communications pod. Let's say you have 4 breakout rooms, and each breakout room is going to have room for 6 sessions. It's 24 total speakers, okay? Out of those, let's say that only 12 have the need for video or even slides. That means that you have 12 speakers, 2 full rooms worth of sessions, where there's no need for screens and videos and things of that nature. That means that if you plan in advance, you can save a lot of money and not have projectors in those 2 rooms or audio setups that require video playback in those 2 rooms. And it means that not only are the people who need video playback and slides prepared and you have what you need for them, but you're saving a lot of money in 2 full breakout rooms by not setting up a screen that's going to sit there black for half of the day. And then when you can bundle your presentation, so everyone who has video needs goes through room A, and everyone who doesn't have video needs goes through room C.
You could, and then the other way you can think about it too is like, hey, we got tracks, right? So like track A is going to be all, I want this in this room. That's where working with the event producer ahead of time allows you to do that one thing we talked about early on, which was like, hey, cool, the first track of the first breakout of this track actually has video and slides. But then 3 tracks don't have anything. But track B, the second one, we can start to be strategic of how we can move around the equipment and really save money, because it's not 4 projectors, 4 speakers for every room. But hey, we're going to have ample time for teams to be able to break down, set up stuff. And like here for this day, track B is going to be the one that has the slides in like the projector. Well, for Tuesday, track A gets the slides. That's a way that you can really be smart with this. That like I've seen ways to save a lot of money on that.
Not to mention, like, give your attendees some credit. If their track is in room 1 at noon and room 2 at 2, they're going to be fine. Just tell them where to go and communicate, and they're going to be fine. Yeah. Let's wrap this up. Tyler, one thing that people should take away from this in terms of thinking about bundling event planning and event production together, why is it valuable? What's one thing that they should take away from this?
One, we talk about the importance of communication. Well, guess what? If the person that is planning is also doing the production, well, they are going to be communicating with themselves. So that's wildly important, though, because then that knowledge is going to be there. There's a lot of times I've seen the planners are off doing their own thing and the production team's completely separate from them. When that happens, you're asking for trouble. By pulling it all together in one, it means your event's going to sing.
Kyle?
I mean, it's going to be cost savings. Like, you will be able to reduce costs. Like, yes, it's still going to cost a lot, but if you're working together, you can be strategic. And that's something that's very hard if you're doing it separately. Like you said, if the right hand and the left hand aren't working together, it's going to be really hard to do some stuff if it's going to be separate, and it's going to be more expensive.
My biggest thing, I think, the 2 things you just said are 1 and 2. But I think the other thing is just, if you allow your AV team to be part of the planning process or take over elements of the planning, it's going to allow you as the event organizer to focus on other things that are going to make the experience great. It's going to allow you to get out of the mud and out of the mire and get into the things that are really going to raise the bar and make people want to come back to your event. This allows the baseline to be covered, allows you to save a little money, but then most importantly, it allows you to go focus on the stuff that's fun for you and fun for your attendees, and is going to keep people coming back.
Keeps growing the business, grows the conference and everything, right? Like, set the culture. How do you want this to be? What's the feel and stuff? It's impossible to do that when you're running around trying to make sure that the speaker showed up, he's got the right microphone and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. Give you the opportunity to actually, like, how do I continue to grow my event? How do I continue to make this thing live past these 2 days we're doing in this one town?
And that's the goal. Bundle it together, make it easier, save some money, have some fun. Kyle, Tyler, thank you so much. This has been the Create Smarter podcast. We will see you all next time. Thanks so much.